Hello there, it's good to be with you again in this slightly strange format, but I hope you're keeping going in all the present circumstances, and it's just a privilege to be able to share with you at the start of this week. I don't know if you count yourself as a positive or a negative sort of person. I guess for many of us the last few months, particularly the last bit since the turn of this year, has been a bit of a challenge, whatever our outlook. I was looking at something on Facebook recently, and a friend of mine who's a retired minister had put something on there about how everybody needed to be more positive, and was starting a campaign about saying no to negativity. And I don't know about you, but there's part of me that gets that. Part of me that thinks, we can all be a bit gloomy, and always, I think particularly it's a British thing sometimes, isn't it, to look for the negative, to try and cut things down when they look like they're going well. But then another part of me thought, do you know what? Sometimes people who are positive and cheerful all the time are really irritating. Is that a terrible thing to admit? That actually that sort of constantly upbeat thing can be quite grating if you're not in that place. Now, I think the conclusion I came to was that it all depends on your personality, on your temperament, on your outlook on life, but also on the circumstances you're facing at any given moment in time. And, again, there's a strange thing that sometimes when we're struggling, someone being really positive and cheery and upbeat is just what we need. And at other times, if we're not in a good place, someone being positive and cheery and upbeat is the worst thing we could ever want. And it's quite hard to explain what that's all about. Sometimes I think we look at the Bible and we look at the characters that God uses throughout the Bible, and even we look around at people we know maybe, and we can kind of jump to this conclusion or have this assumption that it's only the cheerful, happy people that God really uses. That it's only the people who are always positive and upbeat. And actually, I don't think that's quite true. When you look through the Bible, there's such a breadth of people that somehow end up being used by God. Someone like Elijah I find fascinating. On the one minute he's high and he's really joyful and he's triumphant, and the prophets of Baal have gone away and Elijah's just great, and then he's running away into the desert and he prays what I'm really relieved actually to find is a prayer that's in the Bible. He says, "I've had enough, Lord." And Elijah is one of these who seems to swing from one to the other, and maybe we all know people like that. Maybe we're like that ourselves, and actually God can use people like that as well. And then I think about Jeremiah. Jeremiah is sometimes known as the weeping prophet. It's not exactly a great accolade, is it really? But he went through some really difficult things. It's a bit harsh to blame him, because the stuff he had to endure really wasn't what anyone would choose, and maybe he had every right to weep about it a little bit at times. And I was reminded about Jeremiah reading through or looking at some well-known verses in Lamentations. Now, Lamentations is when Jeremiah really does give vent to just how fed up he is with everything and how it's all too much. And I was reading that and reading these well-known verses in the middle of that we so often quote out of context. And they're the verses where it says, "The faithful love of the Lord never ends, his mercies never cease." Or maybe the old version, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never come to an end, they're new every morning." I can remember speaking at a church once and ended up singing that song and going through the chorus bit of "They're new every morning," and "They're new Monday morning." We went through the whole week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through to Saturday and Sunday, and it filled a few minutes, and it was a sort of church where you could get away with that. But I'm not going to do that today, you'll be pleased to know. But one of the things that struck me was that we often look at those verses out of context, and the context of them is Lamentations, is Jeremiah having a whinge, giving vent to just how awful things are for him and how he feels about that. And yet in the middle of that he comes to this affirmation really of God's faithfulness and his trustworthiness. And so I want to think about that just for a few minutes now. I want to think about positivity, negativity and hope. You see, some of us are naturally glass half full people. Some of us are naturally glass half empty people. Usually if someone says they're a realist, I'm a realist, it probably means you're a bit pessimistic in my experience. We all have this basic outlook on life. We all start in different places, but we've got to be careful not to confuse any of those things with the hope that is to be found in Jesus, in our relationship with him. This is something that is for us regardless of whether we consider ourselves positive or negative, regardless of whether at the moment we think we're in quite a cheerful place and we're coping all right, or whether we're absolutely fed up with things and just can't wait for it all to open up again. And you know, whether you're someone who's had your vaccine already and thinking, oh, well, I'm all right, what's wrong with everyone else? Whatever place you're at, this message is for all of us, because it's a hope that's based not on the circumstances around us, not on whatever we're going through, not on whether you're a sunny person or a gloomy person, but on something much more secure. Lamentations 3 is where it comes, and really Jeremiah plumbs new depths here. He starts off by saying, I'm the one who's seen the affliction that comes from the rod of the Lord's anger. He's led me into darkness, shutting out all light. And there's verse after verse of how he's blaming God for a really awful situation that he finds himself in. He shot his arrows deep into my heart. My own people laugh at me. He's filled me with bitterness and given me a bitter cup of sorrow to drink. He's made me chew on gravel. He's rolled me in the dust. Peace has been stripped away and I've forgotten what prosperity is. It's pretty bleak stuff. I'm going to pick up in verse 20. I will never forget, this is Lamentations 3 verse 20, I will never forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. And I was really struck by verse 21 after this litany really of negativity, of how awful things were for him. Yet I still dare to hope. To dare to hope in the middle of all that is quite something. And why does he dare to hope? I dare to hope when I remember this. And this is the bit. What is the foundation for Jeremiah hoping in the middle of everything else? It's this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Unlimited supply. One of the things we've heard a lot recently is the one concern that people seem to have about vaccinations and all that is that the supply might run out. They might not be able to produce enough vaccine quick enough to keep up with the demand, to make sure everyone gets done by a certain time. One thing we can say from this with absolute conviction is that God's faithful love isn't going to run out. His mercies aren't going to stop. There's enough for everyone. There's enough for you. There's enough for me. Whatever situation we're in, the faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Faithful love, it's a great Old Testament word. The steadfast love, the compassion of the Lord, the Hesed. It's his commitment to us. It's God's love for us, but more than that, his commitment to us, his choice to stick by us no matter what, because he is committed to us. And at times it's a great comfort to me to realise again that God is far more committed to me than I am to him. That he is the one who is totally dedicated to me and to making sure that I stick on his path. His faithful love never ends and his mercies never cease. But that could all be a bit vague and a bit general. Great is his faithfulness, his loyalty, his commitment. Even when we're not feeling that loyal, he is. His mercies begin afresh each morning. That's a fantastic thought, because it breaks it down. It's all very well talking about limitless supplies and mercy that goes on forever and faithful love that never runs out. This brings it down to the nitty-gritty of how we live. We live in days, one day at a time, and every day there are new mercies for us. There's new faithfulness for us. It's there for us each morning. And sometimes, living a day at a time, maybe it's something we've all had to learn a little bit more of over this strange period over the last year or so. You can't plan ahead in the same way. You just have to take it one day at a time. And that's the basics of how we live. In fact, it's one of the key things, I think, that Jesus taught. Each day has enough worry of its own, he says. You live in the day, you live in the now. And in the day, in the now, in this morning, there's new mercy. So that's the cause of Jeremiah's hope, that actually, unlike the COVID vaccine, there's no issues with supply of God's faithfulness and God's mercy and God's committed, steadfast love. And actually that's not just a generality, it's not just something vague and out there, it's something that's applicable each and every new day. That's the cause of his hope, not that his circumstances are going to change overnight, not because he's a positive person and he's chosen to be upbeat. Again, there's a lot of this, you've got to choose to think positive thoughts. Well, yeah, okay, but sometimes life isn't that positive. Let's be realistic about it. What does that mean? I'm being a bit of a pessimist, as I said myself earlier. There is hope. I dare to hope. I still dare to hope when I remember this, that God's mercy never runs out and his faithfulness is renewed each morning when we start. And then he goes on to say, I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will hope in him. Because actually, and this is a challenging bit in this, the Lord is my inheritance, not my circumstances. He is the one in whom I'm supposed to find my satisfaction, my fulfillment, my purpose, my joy, my comfort, not all the things that we so often do. And because of that, because he never changes, our hope is in him. So our hope is in God. We still dare to hope, not because we're positive people and we're trying to put a brave face on things, but because his compassion and mercy never runs out and it's new for us every day. And because if we've committed ourselves to him, he's the one in whom we can find our joy and our satisfaction and everything we need, and therefore we can put our hope in him, because that's not going to change. He is who he is. That doesn't change. And as Christians reading this, thousands of years after Jeremiah wrote it, we have the ultimate hope in knowing that Jesus himself, we're about to come into Lent and then we're looking ahead to Easter, and we remember that Jesus himself went through the worst experience of God-forsakenness. He was abandoned, he was left, and he died. But that wasn't the end of the story. And our ultimate source of hope as followers of him is that compassion, that never-ending mercy of God that Jeremiah talks about, took flesh in the person of Jesus, who went through the worst that could be thrown at him and came through and opened the gate so that we could as well. So I want to encourage us this morning, whether you're a positive person or a negative person, to dare to hope. Not that everything will get sorted out next week, because it probably won't. Not that everything will quickly get better, because it may not. But dare to hope in the never-ending, completely overflowingly adequate supply of mercy and faithfulness and love and commitment towards you and me that our God has and that he demonstrated to us in Jesus. And I hope that's an encouragement with you as you start this week. Amen.